Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our State of Trucking 2021 research webinar. This is actually our second installment of our State of Trucking report, and not a surprise, but we're going to talk about how COVID-19 has impacted the truck driving and transportation industry over the next 30 or so minutes that we're chatting together. So to kick us off, I wanted to give some brief introductions of who will be joining us here in this conversation about our State of Trucking research. Joining me are two of my extremely distinguished colleagues. Tom Hodgins is our Vice President of Operations and Recruiting here at Centerline, and he's going to be providing our much needed perspective on probably the thing that's keeping everyone up at night on this call, which is hiring truck drivers. So Tom, you want to say a quick hello?
Sure, Kassandra, thank you. Glad to be with you today and looking forward to the discussion.
Great. Also joining Tom and I is Jim Ledbetter. He is our Senior Safety Manager here at Centerline, and he is responsible for all of the training and providing guidance to our truck drivers on how to stay safe on the road. And with the pandemic not quite gone away yet, COVID-19's really made businesses take a different look at their safety programs and how to keep drivers safe on the road. So we're really excited to have Jim join us as well. So Jim, you want to say a quick hello to everybody as well?
Hello, everyone, and thank you all for having me on. Look forward to the conversation as well.
Perfect. And I am your moderator. I am Kassandra Barnes. I am our Vice President of Marketing here for our People Management Division at TrueBlue, which includes our wonderful company of Centerline drivers. So we're going to get right into it because we got a lot to cover. And I know Tom and Jim are eager to get into this conversation, as am I. So to kind of set the stage here on who we talked to, how many people participated in this year's survey. This year, we talked to over 200 companies that are hiring truck drivers today, and we had over 400 truck drivers participate too and give their perspective. So really excited about this year's participation rate. And, we've uncovered a ton of findings in this study, and I promise you we'll get to as much of it as we possibly can. So we're really going to bucket our conversation really into these three key buckets. The first topic that we'll spend, a good amount of time on is really all about the driver shortage and how it's impacting our industry and what employers are doing to really combat this and get ahead of it in unique and different ways. Secondly, we're going to then spend some time talking about Jim's favorite thing, which is driver safety and how we can keep our drivers safe on the road during this complicated world that we're living in. And then finally, probably the part that you're maybe most eager to hear about is how do you recruit and retain truck drivers in your business? And not only that, but how do you stay competitive? So we're going to spend a lot of time there talking with Tom specifically on how employers can do a better job there of recruiting and retaining truck drivers. So let's start off first with the impact COVID-19's had on our industry and how employers are taking action. And just to share a bit of data, not a surprise for a lot of you on this conversation today, but demand's tight. It's really hard to find truck drivers today. Our good friends at MZ has amazing data on showing just how short this labor market is today. Currently, there's 2.1 million long-haul truck drivers working in the U.S. today, and there's about to be a 12% growth just within the last 5 years. So it's continuing to grow, and I think we've seen our supply chains get really tough, especially during the pandemic when there was so much need for goods being delivered to our homes. So the shortage just continues to get more and more tight. Finding truck drivers today. So this is some data from MZ that shows just how many job postings are out there online today. That's the light blue bar. You can see month over month, the number of truck drivers that people are trying to hire is huge and it's really high. But if you look at that darker blue, that is the number of hires per month people are doing for truck drivers. So you can see we have this huge pent up demand for truck drivers, but not enough supply of drivers out there today. So we're going to spend a good chunk of time talking about this. And that's why I'm going to bring in Tom here, because Tom, this data is really crazy. And it's pretty staggering to see these numbers laid out like this. And I recently read an article where the COO of JB Hunt actually said that this is right now the worst driver shortage that he's seen in his 37-year career. And it seems like it's only going to get prolonged. What differences have you seen in the driver labor market, particularly these last 12 months since COVID-19 took over our country? And what would you attribute the growing shortage to?
Well, thanks, Cassandra. The short answer is the labor market is shrinking. We all know that. In fact, the American Trucking Association's been reporting significant shortages of drivers for years and forecasting extraordinary growth. And some numbers say over 160,000 plus driver shortage by the year 2028. And not only is the number of qualified drivers entering the market shrinking, but we're also losing them on the other end to retirement in large numbers. But there are other factors that are contributing to that shortage as well. Most are aware of the introduction of the FMCSA clearinghouse also, and that has been impacting the number of available drivers. The program took effect this past year in January, actually, of 2020. And it's designed to weed out the drivers with substance abuse violations, which is a real positive for all of us in the industry and for all. However, one statistic I read stated the program has already removed over 40,000 drivers from the available pool just in the year 2020. We've also seen increases and or extensions in unemployment benefits and stimulus payments, deterring otherwise really qualified drivers from re-entering the workforce. And lastly, I'd just throw in that as a result of COVID, many drivers stated that they're just concerned for their safety to the point where they've chosen not to drive.
Yeah, there's just so many factors. Clearly, we can't nail it down to one. It seems to be a bit of a perfect storm happening with everything going on today. But I really want to hone in on one thing that you said there, Tom, was, you mentioned the retirement of drivers, which we've known to be a problem for quite a while. And it's definitely a factor in this driver shortage today. How do you think companies can get ahead of that?
Well, today, over half of all of our truck drivers are over 45 years old. And in fact, a quarter, 25% of them are over 55 years old. And according to the ATA, over the next 10 years, the trucking industry is going to need to hire roughly 1.1 million new drivers due to the retirement and industry growth. And the numbers are just staggering. So, what are employers doing to combat the shortage? The answer is, in short, whatever it takes, including some of the obvious, like raising pay, hiring less experienced drivers, putting more emphasis on soft skills, and modifying or decreasing hiring requirements. But longer term, companies are going to have to expand their overall driver recruitment strategies when it comes to attracting and then keeping qualified drivers. And they're going to have to think more outside of the box, really, I think, than they ever have. Many are gaining traction with a variety of bonus programs that so many of us see, including offering hiring bonuses or safety, tenure bonuses. And of course, many have also teamed up with local CDL driving schools.
Yeah, I mean, creativity seems to be the norm, not the exception these days. And I know we're going to talk a ton about wages and money later in the conversation, but I want to talk a little bit about, right now we know that the driver shortage is real. And, I can't reiterate it enough. We've known about this for a while. And, most companies have been balancing this for quite a while. But there's also these extra costs to the driver shortage that we don't always think about. We always think about how many truck drivers do I have to put in my trucks? But there's other things that go into it that are impacting businesses. And
Right.
you and I know these things, tend to be domino effects on organizations. So what are some of these extra things that, employers need to look out for that can be happening in addition to this driver shortage?
Yeah, great question. One of every two employers we surveyed said they're having a difficult time filling their open positions. And we know that when a truck sits idle, it means lots of bad things, including missing delivery deadlines, decreases in productivity, increases in cost. In fact, according to our 2020 State of Trucking survey, 64% of those surveyed said they had the truck sit for more than a day due to not having enough drivers. And the cost of that truck sitting idle is very high indeed, averaging upwards of $500 a day or over $15,000 per month for just one truck sitting empty. And we know that that can quickly impact an operations bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, just there's so much additional revenue and profit that can be lost just by having an idle truck.
Sure.
So it can feel very grim very quickly. So I want to pivot a little bit here. Sometimes in these really challenging times, innovation sparks. And, there must be some good ideas out there of what companies are doing to approach this competitive labor market. What are some of the ideas that you can share on how employers are really trying to solve for this driver shortage today?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, there's no magic bullet. And in fact, we see the companies being successful using a multi-pronged approach to attract and retain new drivers. We have talked about and we hear most about increasing pay, and there's no doubt that's true. In fact, our survey shows that 90% of employers plan to increase wages this year alone. However, there's other strategies that companies are employing to attract and retain talent. For example, companies are rewarding top employees. They're taking a hard look at the routes and they're optimizing those routes to better accommodate drivers' ability to be at home, which speaks to the whole flexibility and work-life balance. Companies are communicating with drivers frequently, staying in tune. They're providing continual training. They're opening driving schools, or they're partnering with existing ones, and they're investing in new equipment and vehicle maintenance. The list goes on and on. It just goes to show how companies are thinking outside of the box in their recruitment and retention strategies.
Yeah, I feel like every year we get more and more examples of things people are trying to do to stay competitive. And I think it's going to continue to happen, which is exciting because like I said, I think sometimes these challenging times bring about some really great innovation in our industry that can help us be better in the long term. So, Tom, you and I both know I'm in marketing. Like I took like maybe one economics class in college, and I don't really think I need a PhD to totally understand this, but the shortage obviously has looming effects on the broader supply chain as well. So it's not just trucking, it's across the entire supply chain. And, I think we all personally felt this at the start of the pandemic, where we couldn't get certain things that were essential to our homes and our livelihood. So, what are those types of things that you see employers evaluating as they are navigating these decisions and their overall business strategy post-pandemic?
Yeah, well, we know that driver shortage is not only top of mind, Kassandra, but it's actually driving the current environment. For example, the shortages have resulted in companies having to significantly increase pay. That is if they can find drivers at all. And that alone is impacting supplier cost, which only gets passed along to us, the consumer. Carriers are being forced to reevaluate just about everything they're doing, every aspect of the business, which is only really compounded with the increased demand from e-commerce. Carriers want to invest more in containers and trucks, but they're struggling to fill the seats with qualified drivers. And I know one area recently that's being evaluated is driver utilization. Recent studies show that drivers spend really only about 6 hours of their day actually driving. And those inefficiencies are now being studied. And they're trying to come up with ways that can increase that number, just 7 hours or 8 hours. because it means hiring less drivers.
No, I love that perspective, because it's a different approach to an age-old problem.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your insights there, Tom. So I'm gonna say a really bad pun here, but I'm gonna shift gears a little bit, Tom. Completely intended. We are on a webinar here about truck driving, so I want to shift gears here and talk about safety now. So I'm going to bring Jim into the conversation here a little bit to talk about safety and how COVID-19 has really impacted the way that we think about safety for drivers. And before we dive into this conversation, I want to share a quick stat here where we found in our state of trucking research this year that 63% of employers are increasing safety measures within their organization. And I would argue, Jim, you probably wish that was 100%. Safety is an all hands on deck initiative, and companies really need to be completely on board to keeping truck drivers safe on the road. So I want to spend some time talking a little bit more about, some different things that we've seen in safety over the past year and how we can continue to keep truck drivers safe on the road. So, Jim, let's start with COVID. We're on the topic here. As of today, over 50% of the country has had at least one vaccine shot. But we know there's still hesitancy, and I'm sure truck drivers are included in that. But how do you see the vaccine impacting the overall trucking industry? Do you think it's going to help? Is it going to get us back to normal? Or do you think it's too soon to tell?
Well, it's a great question. Yes, the vaccine's obviously going to impact the trucking industry big time. The more and more people that opt to decide to get fully vaccinated, the COVID restrictions are going to loosen across the country. Once these COVID restrictions begin to loosen, more and more folks, especially the consumers, like Tom was mentioning before, the cost of goods or the purchases of goods it's going to ramp up. And it's going to be very impactful, I think, across the country, especially with the summer months coming on here quickly as well. Last summer, a lot of people were trapped at home. They were trapped within their homes. They had canceled vacations and whatever the case may be. The general public, the American, is ready to get out and about this year. They want to move. They want to go out. They want to exercise those vacations. They want to take their families out. And with that being said, we're going to have drivers in place in order to support that increase in the consumer goods.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And you are spot on with the warm weather impacting the busyness of our cities. I'm here in Chicago, and last weekend was one of the most beautiful weekends here in the city, and it was busy. There were quite a few people out. It started to feel a lot more like normal starting to happen across the country. So, Jim, obviously safety is near and dear to you and to me and Tom and everybody here at Centerline. And we know COVID-19 really added to the risks that our drivers assume every single day. And we want to continue to protect those drivers while they're out on the road and delivering goods across the country. What do you see businesses doing today to ensure safety within their operation?
Yeah, I think today, I think anybody that's especially involved in this industry, they're probably hearing the term sanitation more than they've ever heard it. General house cleaning has never been more important. Specifically in those slip-seated operations and also those team operations, right? And it even goes for this outside of that as well. Let's face it, drivers aren't assigned, for the most part, as an asset that's theirs to drive 7 days a week, 5 days a week, whatever the case may be. So there's multiple drivers climbing in and out of that truck. I think the sanitation measures right now are as important than ever. I think that's going to be our new norm. I don't think that's going to change by any means. But you see a lot of time involved by not only the driver, but also the on-site, the fleet manager, the private fleet manager, or whatever the case may be. He or she is also exhausting a lot of time, a lot of effort into the sanitation methods And it's going to have to continue. You can't get lax with those efforts because the minute that you do, it's all for none, right? You got to continue the methods and be strategic. And really, that's probably one of the key elements in order to keep your fleet safe and out of risk from being infected, not only from COVID-19 but from other viruses, the flu, and whatever the case may be.
Yep. No, I think sanitation's here to stay, which is great. I think it's going to keep all of us safer and healthier in the long run. Jim, you work with hundreds, thousands of drivers every single year, and there's got to be some common injuries that tend to be what I consider repeat offenders. What are those common injuries that employers really need to watch out for and continuously train drivers to make sure that they don't have these injuries as often?
Yeah, based off my knowledge, and I've been in this industry for a long time. I've managed a lot of different facets of the transportation industry, but where I'm seeing an increase in terms of injuries is really related to those organizations that require a lot of hand unload, a lot of touch freight is what I like to call it. If you're fingerprinting every box on that trailer, with that comes the element of fatigue. With the element fatigue increases the risk of injury. I think more times than not, again, that customer service can sometimes supersede the element of safety, which can't happen. I think a lot of times that organizations will take shortcuts or pencil whip some of the training in terms of pallet jack operations or forklift operations just to get a driver in the seat of that truck so that they can take care of the customer service requirements for their clients or their customers, whatever the case may be. Again, the minute you do that, the minute you take them shortcuts, it's all for none. I always kind of revert back to the 330-1 rule. For every 300 times that an employee performs an unsafe act, there may be 30 near misses, and then there may be that one incident where that employee injures him or herself bad. Which not only we want to send people home safe, but look at the financial impact that it has not only for the employee who can't come into work now, but look at the financial the impact that it has on the employer as well. Not to mention the perception. Nobody wants to come work for an unsafe organization. They don't want to walk in the front door with the understanding that, hey, this is a pallet jack operation. I might be hand unloading 2,200 boxes of product throughout the course of the day over 10 to 12 stops. If I'm not going to get the training provided to be successful, do I really want to come work for that organization?
Yeah. No, and I think that's so important in that, safety is everything that everybody should be concerned with, and drivers continuously tell us in our state of trucking research that getting home safe every single night is really important to them, as it should be. Because they assume the risk that comes with being on the road, and they want to make sure that they get home safe to their families. So it's quite a deciding factor in who to work for. So it's definitely important to keep safety top of mind. And Jim, I know you teach across the country and teach about safety and reinforcing to drivers that safe behavior really reduces their risk and that it's important. But, we all know we're dealing with humans here. We don't always, soak things in the first time we hear it. So how can companies continue to reinforce, and not only reinforce, but how do they motivate their employees to follow their safety programs?
A lot of folks think it has to be a monetary value and an incentive in order to be successful. Does it work? Absolutely, it works. Paid by performance. At the end of the day, employees are going to pay a bonus to an employee for work that they wish to see get complete. Okay, and a lot of that work that gets complete, obviously, the element of safety is sprinkled into that at the end of the day. It does work, but really other methods of that too is identifying employees in the middle of doing safe acts, and it's more of doing more random observations and so forth. the more and more that the private fleet manager or the transportation manager can spend away from his or her desk, okay, and on that warehouse floor or in the trailer with the driver, experiencing what he or she's going through, even out and about in the field, watching some random observations at the delivery site as well too, is that's where you're going to capture that pat on the back philosophy, where you're seeing somebody in the act of doing something safe, and you reward them verbally. It goes a long way. And not only that, it helps identify risk that are associated with that person's day-to-day work environment. Another that kind of falls back into the philosophy of behavior-based safety training, and where it's the training is coming from the floor up, not from the top level to the bottom level. Because really, when you think about it, it's the drivers, the warehouse folks, those are the ones that are exposed to the risk daily. They're the ones that we need support from each and every day in terms of identifying risk and then removing that risk.
Yep. I love that bottom up versus top down approach that you talk about a lot, Jim. And, one final point on here before we jump into our next section. There's so many risks that our drivers take on every day. But what do you think is the one thing on the road that drivers really need to watch out for?
That's a great question, and I'm going to go back to the summer months that are quickly approaching here, and again the COVID restrictions that are loosening. The world is opening back up again. If you recall last year about this time, the federal government exhausted a lot of money into our roadways and highway and surface road construction. They did that because probably 90% of our population was staying home and working. So it was a good opportunity to do it. But now that the vaccine's available, restrictions are being loosened. A lot of that construction is still in process. Okay, so you take that and then you incorporate that, or you accompany the amount of traffic that's going to be on the roadways this summer. My advice, and I'll go and for those of you that have been exposed to the Smith system philosophy is I always revert back to key 4. Which is leaving yourself and out, that escape plan. I can't stress more to drivers this summer that we've heard the term social distancing all year long, but be a social distance driver now as well, okay? Stay away from the packs, stay away from the clusters of cars, because there's a lot of people out there that are, first of all, you're coming in the summer months, they possibly could be impaired, or they're going to be extremely distracted by family in the car, cell phones trying to find directions, and whatever the case may be, even eating while they're on the road. So I can't stress enough this summer with the construction and the amount of folks that are getting back out on the road to be a socially distanced driver. Okay, pick the lane of least resistance, stay in it, and let those packs and clusters pass you by.
And I think that's good advice for not just truck drivers. I think that's good advice for all drivers out there. I know everybody's eager to get back on the road. And I think the biggest thing that I'm hearing from you, Jim, as a takeaway for those of us like myself who are just, traveling the roadways with truck drivers all the time is, be patient and, be on the lookout and be courteous and give drivers plenty of room and space as we're navigating travel in these coming months. So I think it's a good reminder to everyone I love that term, social distance driving. I'm on board. So, all right. Well, we're going to shift gears one more time. That landed the first time, so I'm going to keep with the pun. So we're going to talk a little bit more, Tom, about how do we stay really competitive in today's market. And, we're in the home stretch here, so this is the last section. But I know that this is one where people are really interested in hearing, what they can do to recruit and retain drivers. So I'm going to share this quick stat before we get into this, Tom, but 76% of drivers this year say competitive pay is the number one thing that they're looking for when selecting a company. But, you and I both know that's not the only thing. If you asked you or I or anybody, pay would probably be number one in most people's hearts.
Right.
So I want to talk a little bit more about what else employers can do to attract top talent. So, first, Tom, we study this frequently. We talk about this a ton, and, we really want to get at the core of what's important and what motivates people when thinking about their work, especially truck drivers. What are drivers really looking for when selecting an employer?
Well, you touched on one that's so important, but you're right, there is a lot more. In fact, if you take a look at our survey, over half the drivers that we talked with said they do not feel wages are competitive today. And an alarming 65% would consider looking for new opportunities if offered better pay. So pay is a big deal. But as you suggested, our data tells us that drivers are looking for more than just top pay. So we can't keep our focus solely there. There's other very important things to our drivers, things like job location and the routes being selected. Things like work-life balance are critical. In flexible environments where drivers are shown appreciation, and of course, excellent healthcare benefits are critical to many as well.
Yeah, I mean, we get to peek behind the scenes and, see all this really great data that we have from the state of trucking research. And there is just so many other things. And I think some of them are not difficult things for people to think about when they're recruiting and trying to retain truck drivers. So, Tom, obviously the theme for this year's State of Trucking is all about the impact of COVID-19 on trucking and the transportation industry. And, I want to take a little bit of a COVID-19 lens on this question, but, do you think the pandemic has actually permanently changed how we recruit drivers? And I'm going to lead the witness here because you and I talk about this all the time, but if yes, what do you think's changed?
Well, we all know that professional truck driver recruitment was already very challenging prior to the pandemic, and certainly COVID-19 has taken that to a whole new level. In fact, as we said earlier, many drivers have stopped driving altogether due to the COVID-19 fears. So as the challenge rises, companies really need to focus on what's important to the driver. For example, in our current environment, as Jim mentioned, promoting what the fleet is doing to protect drivers is a critical success factor. Also, how we're connecting with drivers is also changing. Face-to-face interviewing, for example, over this past year has been almost impossible, Kassandra. Picking up the phone and calling a potential driver has always been a widely used method to communicate, but the pandemic forced many of us to introduce current day technology into the recruiting cycle. For example, video interviewing, text messaging, emailing, social media advertising have all become powerful tools for us to attract top talent.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy how many virtual interviews we've had to do in this past year.
Yes.
And, I mean, a lot of this stuff is here to stay, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think it's forced recruitment to, like we talked about earlier, innovate and do something different. And I think it's, really going to be here to stay for quite a while. So Tom, we work with companies all the time, trying to figure out how to find the right people for their business. And there's got to be some secret, right, on what companies are doing correctly to recruit and hire truck drivers. What do you think the best in class organizations are doing today to recruit and retain truck drivers?
Well, I'll tell you this, the best companies are getting in tune with and paying attention to what's important to the driver, right? In our survey, we asked drivers, what do you love about truck driving? And they talked about loving the independence of the road and the pay and the stability that the career offers. And in addition to gearing their recruitment strategies to those factors, the company shared other insights about what they're doing that is working for them. Number one, they're using a mobile-friendly recruitment process. In fact, here at Centerline, we see around 80% of our applicants applying from a mobile device today. They're increasing their usage of social media. A surprising statistic from our drivers, three quarters of the Centerline drivers say that they access Facebook on a daily basis. They're also offering wellness benefits, and they're keeping work-life balance top of mind. It's simply too important to the younger generation today to ignore, and they just won't work without it, actually. And so I would say, in short, the new generation of drivers is looking for job stability, financial security, career growth, and most of all, they just want to feel valued, as all of us do.
Yeah. And it's crazy to hear that stat, Tom, that over 80% of our drivers apply on mobile. And I recall not even a decade ago when we were talking about recruitment online, we were talking about, oh my gosh, mobile's going to outpace desktop usage, and it was neck and neck. And now it's just rapidly overtaken the desktop experience in so many industries, not just trucking. So I think it's really good advice to think about how you're creating that mobile experience for drivers, because that's how they're searching. So it's a really good takeaway. So I'm going to ask one more question here, Tom. There's a lot of stereotypes out there about truck drivers and what's important to them. We see it all the time in the media, movies, TV shows, etc. And I want to take a pause here to think about, what are the biggest misconceptions that you think people have about hiring and retaining drivers today, and how can we combat that misconception?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions, because it's so top of mind and it's so much out there in the news, is that drivers are looking solely for more money. The thought process is, if you pay them well, give them a big sign-on bonus, they should be satisfied and stay put, right? Well, the facts show us that way of thinking simply isn't true. Some of the main themes within the comments that we received in our survey from drivers included areas that really don't cost anything. Things like feeling valued within the company, being treated with respect and given consistent workloads and stability. Being able to provide a flexible environment and showing drivers appreciation can go a long way.
No, and I think that's a good reminder for all of us. If you see a truck driver today, please thank them. They've done a lot for us, not only this past year, but throughout our whole lives. And, sometimes their work sometimes seems thankless. And, we really want to make sure that drivers are valued and appreciated and show that, we really have their back, and, we're thankful for them every single day. So that's a great point to end on, Tom. So, we're going to end our conversation there. We've talked for quite a while here, guys. And, I know it's really hard every single year to get all of this great data from the state of trucking research and cram it into a brief conversation via a webinar here. So if you're eager to learn more, I encourage you to go to our website, centerlinedrivers.com. We have our full state of trucking research study available. There's tons more stats in there to really help you think about, this new year and this new era of trucking post-COVID. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and thank you for your time. We know that the last 12 months have been trying for a lot of people, and we greatly appreciate your business, and we cannot be more grateful to our truck drivers, as I mentioned earlier, who work so diligently throughout the entire pandemic to deliver essential goods across our country, whether it's food, medicine, our much needed vaccines, supplies, PPE, and we really want to encourage you to go out there and, like I said, thank a truck driver today. So thank you all so much for joining us. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and we will see you next time. Thanks.